The salt air of the Mediterranean is thick, stinging your eyes as you sit on a rusted pier in a coastal town that doesn't appear on any modern digital map. You are 32 years old, and for the last decade, your life has been defined by the rigid, predictable lethality of the French Foreign Legion's elite reconnaissance units. You are currently holding a cheap plastic cup of lukewarm espresso, watching a group of local fishermen haul in net-served silver scales, thinking about the quiet pension you've earned and the civilian life that is supposed to begin tomorrow. Then the silence is broken by the heavy, rhythmic thud of a blacked-out Eurocopter approaching from the north. It doesn't land at the nearby airfield. It hovers directly over the pier, kicking up a spray of seawater that ruins your coffee. Two men in charcoal grey tactical suits rappel down with a fluidity that speaks of a Tier 1 training. They don't point weapons at you, but their posture is a threat in itself. One of them hands you a waterproof tablet. On the screen is a live feed of your younger sister's apartment in Lyon. A red laser dot is dancing across her forehead while she reads a book on her sofa. You don't ask who they are. You don't ask what they want. You simply stand up, crush the plastic cup in your hand, and walk toward the winch line. Your life as a soldier ended the moment that laser touched her skin. Your life as a ghost has just begun. 3 hours later, you are in a pressurized cabin 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, staring at a dossier for a man who is technically dead. He is a financier for 3 different insurgencies and lives in a fortress carved into the side of a Swiss Alp, protected by a private security force larger than the police departments of most mid-sized cities. The man across from you, whose face remains in the shadows, explains that you aren't being hired to be a sniper or a soldier. You are being hired to be an inevitability. You are given a bank account number with more zeros than you've ever seen and a set of some biometric credentials that will open doors in every major capital on Earth. There is no training period. Your first test is to eliminate a man protected by $100 million worth of technology and steel. You spend 48 hours studying the thermal output of the mountain's ventilation system. You realize that a frontal assault is suicide and a long-range shot is impossible due to the atmospheric refraction of the mountain air. Instead, you decide to weaponize the target's own luxury. You infiltrate the supply chain of his favourite vintage of Bordeaux, spending 6 months working as a low-level cellar hand in a French vineyard until you are the one responsible for the final sealing of the crates. You don't use poison. Poison is traceable. You use a microscopic pressurised vial of an odourless, colourless gas that triggers a massive pulmonary embolism 4 hours after the bottle is uncorked. When the financier dies during a private dinner, the world's best doctors call it a natural heart failure. You're already 3 borders away when the news breaks. You have passed the entrance exam. By your 3rd year in the trade, you have ceased to exist in any government database. You move through the world like a shadow cast by a high-flying bird. Your targets are no longer just wealthy criminals. They are the people who own the people who run the world. You are the man called when a tech mogul in Silicon Valley decides to sell a backdoor encryption key to a hostile foreign power, or when a sitting prime minister becomes a liability to the shadow cabinet that funded their rise. Your fee is now $50 million per contract, half of it up front to cover the staggering costs of your operations. You maintain a network of cleaners, spotters, and technical architects who never see your face. You communicate through encrypted dead drops and high-frequency bursts of data that look like background noise on the global internet. The stakes have shifted from mere survival to a complex game of geopolitical chess. You aren't just killing people, you are shifting the balance of power. You learn the anatomy of security details, the inner circle, the perimeter, the technological net. You learn that every human being, no matter how protected, has a rhythm. They breathe, they eat, they sleep, and they have vices. You exploit the rhythm. In the 5th year, you receive the Level Red contract. The target is a former head of an intelligence agency who has retreated to a private island in the South China Sea. He has a surface-to-air missile battery, a battalion of former Spetsnaz guards, and a radar system that can detect a bird at 20 miles. He knows you are coming because he is the one who designed the system that birthed your career. This is no longer a job, it is a duel. You spend 3 months living in a subsurface submersible, drifting with the ocean currents to avoid sonar detection. You don't use high-tech gadgets for the final approach. You use a simple rebreather and swim 4 miles in pitch-black water, avoiding the thermal sensors by hugging the cold water vents on the seabed. When you reach the island, you don't go for the target immediately. You spend 4 days buried in the sand on the edge of the perimeter, slowing your heart rate to 40 beats per minute to blend into the natural heat signature of the Earth. You watch the guards. You realize that the flaw isn't in the tech, but in the boredom of the men. They are too well paid, too comfortable. On the 5th night, you disable the island's backup generator in a way that looks like a salt corrosion failure. In the 7 seconds of darkness before the secondary power kicks in, you cross 100 yards of open ground. You don't use a gun, you use a high tensile wire. The target dies in his bed, eyes wide, realizing in his final seconds that his fortress was just a very expensive coffin. You leave no trace, no shell casings, no fingerprints, no DNA. The world wakes up to find a power vacuum in the global intelligence community, and you wake up in a safe house in Tokyo, already planning the next move. As your reputation grows within the narrow, terrifying circle of the global elite, the nature of your contracts changes. You are no longer just an assassin. You are a consultant for the impossible. You are hired to eliminate a ghost target, a man whose existence is a state secret living in a subterranean bunker beneath a neutral European capital. The security is absolute. Biometric pulses, floor sensors that detect a change in weight of 5 grams and a permanent air gap from the outside world. To reach him, you don't break in. You become part of the infrastructure. You spend 2 years qualifying as a specialized technician for the very company that services the bunker's life support systems. You learn the blueprints of the air filtration system until you can visualize it with your eyes closed. You realize that the target is protected from everything except the very air he breathes. You don't use a gas this time. You introduce a specific strain of a synthesized, fast-acting fungal spore into the humidifiers. It is designed to be dormant for 10 days, giving you time to resign your position and vanish before the first symptoms appear. When the bunker is eventually opened, the authorities find a tomb of perfectly preserved bodies killed by an unfortunate biological anomaly. Your employer pays you in gold bullion delivered to a warehouse in Zurich. You are now wealthy enough to buy a small country, but you live in a series of identical high-end apartments, never staying in one place for more than a week. The psychological toll begins to manifest in your 7th year. You start to see the world not as a collection of people and places, but as a series of vulnerabilities and trajectories. You see a crowded street and your brain automatically highlights the escape routes, the line of sight obstructions, and the soft tissue targets. You no longer feel empathy, only a cold clinical curiosity about how someone manages to survive as long as they do. Your moral compass has been demagnetized by the sheer scale of the corruption you witness. You've seen the private ledgers of the world's most philanthropic billionaires. You've seen the orders for child labor signed by human rights icons. You realize that the people you kill are often no worse than the people who hire you. You are simply the instrument that keeps the machine from overheating. This realization leads to your first act, professional rebellion. You are hired to eliminate a young whistleblower who has proof of a global pharmaceutical cover-up. Instead of killing her, you use your resources to stage her death with such surgical precision that even the agency hiring you is convinced. You spend $4 million of your own money to build her a new identity and relocate her to a remote part of the Andes. It is the most difficult difficult contract you've ever executed because it required leaving someone alive. By year 10, you have reached the apex of the hierarchy. You are the high-stakes hitman, a legend whispered about in the Situation Room and the Kremlin. You are the reason why the world's most protected people still look over their shoulders when they enter a secure room. But being at the top means you are the ultimate target. You discover that a coalition of your former employers has formed a containment committee. You have become too knowledgeable, too efficient, and too expensive. They decide to retire you. The first attempt comes in London, a coordinated strike by 4 snipers while you are walking through a crowded park. You survive not through luck, but through the sheer paranoia you've cultivated. You had spent the morning tracking the local police radio frequencies and noticed a maintenance blackout in that specific sector. You dive behind a stone fountain a fraction of a second before the first .338 Lapua round shatters the air. You don't run, you hunt. Using a suppressed subcompact you kept in an ankle holster, you eliminate the 2 closest shooters before crowd even realises what's happening. You vanish into the London Underground, shedding your coat and your identity before the first siren is heard. The war that follows lasts for 18 months. It is a silent global conflict fought in the shadows of the world's financial capitals. You are one man against a multi-billion-dollar apparatus, but you have one advantage they don't. You know exactly how they think because you were their primary tool for a decade. You begin a systematic campaign of counter-assassination. You don't go after the shooters, you go after the board members of the containment committee. You hit them where they feel safest. You eliminate a Russian oligarch in his armoured yacht in the middle of the Atlantic by sabotaging the vessel's fire suppression system to flood the engine room with CO2. You eliminate a former CIA director in his Virginia estate by hacking his smart insulin pump. Each death is a message. The walls you've built won't save you. The power dynamics shift. The remaining members of the committee realise that trying to kill you is costing them more than your silence ever would. They offer a truce, a permanent retirement, in exchange for a total cessation of hostilities. You accept the truce, but you aren't a fool. You know that in this world there is no such thing as retirement. There is only a change in status. You move to a remote villa in the mountains of Montenegro, a fortress of your own design. You have sensors that extend 5 miles in every direction. You have a satellite uplink that monitors the movement of every private jet and military transport on the planet. You sit on your terrace, looking out over the Adriatic at the same sea where your journey began. You are 44 years old, and you possess the wealth of a king and the secrets of a dozen empires. Your sister is safe, living under a protected identity in a place they will never find. You spend your days reading philosophy and practicing long-range marksmanship on steel plates 2 kilometers away. You are the most dangerous man alive, not because of what you can do with a rifle, but because you know exactly how the world's most protected people sleep at night. The tension never truly leaves you. Every time a car drives too slowly past your gate or a drone appears in the distant sky, your hand moves toward the suppressed pistol hidden beneath the table. You realize that you have become the very thing you used to hunt, a highly protected person living in a gilded cage of your own making. You understand now that the high stakes were never about the money or the power. They were about the loss of your own humanity. You are a ghost who still breathes, a man who has mastered the art of ending lives but has forgotten how to live his own. The phone on the table, a specially modified, encrypted device that has been silent for 3 years, suddenly vibrates. There is no caller ID, only a string of coordinates and a name. The name is the man who first rappelled onto that pier in the Mediterranean. The coordinates are for a location in Washington, D.C., inside the White House. The message is simple. He's gone rogue. You're the only one who can get close. You stare at the screen for a long time. You could ignore it. You could stay in your mountain fortress and grow old in the silence. But you realize that the cycle doesn't end until you end it. You stand up, pick up the phone, and begin to pack a small nondescript bag. The world's most protected person has just become your next target, and the game begins again, higher and deadlier than ever before. You walk toward the helipad you installed on the cliffside, the wind whipping your hair, feeling that familiar cold clarity return. You aren't a soldier, and you aren't a ghost. You are the check and balance for the powerful, the shadow that reminds them they are mortal. As the blades of your private transport begin to spin, you realize that you aren't going to DC to finish a job. You're going there to burn the entire system down. The hunt is no longer about a contract. It is about the final, absolute exercise of power. You are the high-stakes hitman, and the world is finally about to see what happens when the weapon decides to choose its own targets.